right now, even though it's happened at the time of our recording a couple of days ago. The Boston Red Sox firing longtime manager Alex Cora and basically their entire coaching staff. That include Peter Fazzi, Dylan Lawson, Ramon Vasquez, their bench coach, and Jason Varitek, their longtime Boston Red Sox player. Then he was their game planning coach, and then Joe Cronin as well. This is a big one because not often do you see, one, managers fired in April. Number two, it's not often that you see an entire coaching staff essentially removed this early in the season or at all. So that's a big time surprise that the Boston Red Sox said, you know what, we're going to move on from everybody. And this is seemingly the end of a long time power struggle within the Red Sox organization between Alex Cora and Craig Breslow, because I think people looked at what's been going on in Boston with the Red Sox and you say, okay, are the Red Sox going to stand by Alex Cora, or are they going to stand by their chief baseball officer, Craig Breslow, who's leading that front office? And you now see the decision that ownership, John Henry, Sam Kennedy, the team's president and CEO, they made. And they stood behind Craig Breslow, and they said, we are going to go into this next era of Boston Red Sox baseball with Craig Breslow 100% leading this thing. And now, they hired or brought in Chad Tracy, who was managing their AAA team, to be the interim manager. But Craig Breslow will now get an opportunity to decide who his guy is going to be in this next chapter, in this next era of Boston Red Sox baseball. But it has not been pretty for the Boston Red Sox over the last several years. And if there was a word to describe what the Boston Red Sox have been since 2018 when they won the World Series, it would probably be dysfunction. Dysfunction would be the best word to describe the Boston Red Sox, because you look at what has happened in this organization since they won the World Series. You have to start with the Mookie Betts trade, right? Trading, at that time, Mookie was a top 2 player in all of Major League Baseball, gets traded to the LA Dodgers, signs the second largest contract in the history of Major League Baseball at the time, $365 million with the Dodgers. And you see what Mookie's done in LA since he left. 3-time World Series champ, going to be a future Hall of Famer. And you can probably say that Mookie is going to go into the Hall of Fame with a Dodgers cap on and not a Red Sox cap, which maybe you didn't know you would say when he was winning MVPs with the Boston Red Sox. So then you go from the Mookie Betts trade to the firing of Chaim Bloom, who was the person that was charged to make that trade, even though you can clearly see that he was scapegoated in that situation. Because a lot of times when a move like that is made, it's not necessarily the president of baseball operations, GM, whoever's in charge at the time, that is saying this is a move that needs to be made. If it's about 99.9% of the time, a move like that is made about money. And the Red Sox had decided that they weren't going to pay Mookie Betts what he was worth. And so they made that trade with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Mookie got his money in LA. The Red Sox got a boatload of prospects, none of whom ended up turning out to be everyday players in the big leagues. And that's one of the biggest misses in the history of Major League Baseball, and definitely in recent memory with that trade. And then after Chaim Bloom gets fired, the Red Sox hire Craig Breslow to be their chief baseball officer. And Craig Breslow, many people know him right now just from the front office, chief baseball officer side. But Craig Breslow played baseball for a long time in the big leagues. And when you have a former player that becomes a member of a front office or becomes a GM or president of baseball operations, usually what happens is the advantage is that guy knows the player mindset and has learned the business side of the game and the roster construction side of the game and the team building side of the game. And for a lot of people it's always an advantage to have that knowledge, right, of a guy that played the game, knows what players are thinking, knows what to look for, and can communicate clearly with former players. Something that gets lost sometimes in that relationship between player and executive. But from many people I've talked to around baseball, whether that is executives around the game, former players, current players, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect for Craig Breslow when it comes to the communication. And when you see what happened last year with the Rafael Devers situation, where there was just constant back and forth in this communication faux pas, where the Red Sox sign Alex Bregman to play third base. They don't communicate it necessarily clearly to Rafael Devers that they're going to be doing that. It's not communicated necessarily the best what they want Rafi to do. Bregman gets hurt. They want Rafi to play third base. He says, nope, you didn't want me to play third base, so I really don't want to play third base now. And then there's this weird just back and forth all year long. Alex Cora has to put out fires. And then they ultimately trade Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants in the middle of June, which took all of baseball by surprise again. And it seems like over the last 7-8 years, the surprises have been the word of those years for the Boston Red Sox, because you trade Rafael Devers in essentially what is now a pure salary dump, where they didn't like how Rafi handled that situation. You could get out from under the $300 million that you gave him and could go in a different direction. And then you have this past offseason, Alex Bregman, who wanted to come back to the Boston Red Sox, and this another communication error where there's this back and forth. You didn't think he had the deal that he actually got. Cubs made a better offer, and he says, you know what? I'm out. And the Red Sox lose a guy who, in a very short amount of time, became the leader of that team in Boston. And here we are in the month of April, the Red Sox 11-17, as we sit here right now at the time of this recording, in last place in the AL East. And once again, more dysfunction. And it got to a point where Craig Breslow and Sam Kennedy and John Henry, the owner of the Boston Red Sox, leader of the Fenway Sports Group, said, yeah, this can't go on anymore. And they made the decision to not only fire Alex Cora, who many people thought would be able to stay at least until the end of the season, just because of the respect that he has within the organization, the time that he's been there, the success that he's had. But they decided that at this point right now, what was best for the organization was not to have Alex Cora leading the charge. And it was also not to have those 5 coaches on the staff anymore either. And from some of the reporting that's been done in the last couple of days from, the great beat reporters out in Boston, players haven't really liked what happened either. And in this situation, there have been players that have spoken out that, they didn't take any questions. They being, Sam Kennedy and Craig Breslow and John Henry, after they met with the team briefly to inform them that they were making a change, at the manager position and on the coaching staff. And players seem bothered by that their input did not matter. I do think what's interesting about that is I think some of those players realized something that has always existed in baseball of like, hey man, you go out there and lace them up every night, and we'll go out there and make these decisions on how we are going to construct this roster. And I think there are guys that are like, oh, okay, got it. And I think there's so much time left in this season. It could get ugly in terms of where you go as a team just to get through the 6 months that are left in this season. Like, there are hurt feelings in that organization right now. There are players that are kind of confused as to what they're supposed to do right now. There are people that are looking around of, where does this organization go? And I think that would be my thought right now. That's my biggest thought right now for the Boston Red Sox is, what are you as an organization? Where are you going? Because of right now, you're a team that has no identity. You're an organization that has no identity. And I think sometimes it sounds crazy to say that about a franchise like the Boston Red Sox, because you hear Boston Red Sox, you're thinking the upper echelon franchises in Major League Baseball. You're putting them up there with the Cubs and the Yankees and the Dodgers. Like, you're talking about the big boys in Major League Baseball. But the reality is they have not been that organization in some time. And I think that's why there is been this disconnect between maybe what the Red Sox think they are as an organization and what reality and recent history has said about what they are as an organization. Since they won the World Series in 2018, they have 5 seasons missing the postseason. They've been in the postseason 3 times since they won the World Series. Last year, when they were a first round out, getting knocked out in the wild card round by the Yankees. The ALCS in 2021. And then, their World Series in 2018. That's it. And so I think for Red Sox fans, you're like, hey, man, what are we doing here? How do you get better? How do you improve? Because now you have a team that has not necessarily done well in free agency. And for a franchise like the Boston Red Sox, you shouldn't struggle signing guys in free agency. Now, they made some decent trades. You pick up a guy who's a perennial Cy Young candidate in Garrett Crochet. But when you have a talent like that, you want to be able to build around him. And the Red Sox have just not been able to do that over the last couple of years. You were able to get a guy like an Alex Bregman and bring him in, and that looked like a guy who was going to be in Boston for a long time. The fan base loved him. He fit in with what they did offensively, defensively, and big time as a leader, which you look at this team, this organization, this roster, like something they needed. And you even say, you know what? We could take or leave that guy. And then he says, you know what? Got it. I'm going to go to Chicago and play with the Chicago Cubs with a roster that is building towards something. And you guys have fun with your dysfunction. And I think Alex Bregman is probably very happy with his decision. But there's just so much dysfunction, so much going wrong in Boston. It is hard to see this getting better. And last year, after they traded Rafael Devers, something that Craig Breslow said was that we think we're going to get to the end of this and be a better baseball team. And to his credit, last year, he was right. They went on a run. They ended up in the postseason, even though they got bounced in that wild card round. And this time, I don't necessarily know if it's going to work out the same way. I would be shocked, actually, if it worked out the same way. And like I said, there's so much time in the season. And something we've talked about on the podcast, nobody's really running away with anything right now. But I have a hard time believing that the Red Sox, who are currently one of the worst teams in baseball, they don't necessarily do anything well. And now you have this cloud over the organization's head, over that 26-man roster's head of, we fired the manager, we fired all these coaches, guys that team had gotten to know and trusted over those years. And now you have to learn a lot of different people, new people, even though many of those guys who are now in place are from within the organization. You got to learn a new manager, right? Chad Tracy is not Alex Cora. And so there are going to be times where you're doing things differently. And I think for the Red Sox, this is a time where they have to look in the mirror. And you have to have a honest conversation and maybe a tough conversation about what you are as a franchise, what you are as an organization. And there has to be some change. Now, one, they made a big change, but there has to be other changes from those who remain in the organization to get themselves back to a position where you are a respected franchise in Major League Baseball. I don't think I've asked people within the game of baseball how the Red Sox are perceived, and you don't necessarily get great answers right now. And that's not something that you've always said about that organization, about that franchise. And so as we go here and to finish out the month of April, going into the month of May, there's still so much time. Maybe the Red Sox salvage some of their season, but to say that they're going to go on this magical run to the postseason after firing a respected manager and many coaches that guys in that room really appreciated, I have a hard time believing that. So for Craig Breslow and Sam Kennedy and, John Henry, the chairman of the ownership group, there has to be some soul searching right now, because when you have made so many decisions that have been to the detriment of the franchise, whether it's trading Mookie Betts, whether it's firing one executive who was in charge, hiring another, trading a player midseason because of seemingly disliking how he went about a situation, not re-signing a player who clearly wanted to be in Boston. The ball's been dropped a lot over the last couple of years for the Red Sox. And Sam Kennedy and John Henry made a decision that they were going to stand by Craig Breslow. And now we are going to see what Craig Breslow's vision for this organization is going to be, because now he's going to have the say in who the next manager is and how he wants to continue to put his stamp on this organization. But the big question for the Boston Red Sox going forward, who are you and who do you want to be? So hey guys, thanks for watching this episode of The Relay with Russ Dorsey. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you have a question for me, be sure to drop it in the comments below, and we'll catch you again here next time.